Welcome back. Today is all about emotional unavailability. There are so many men out there who are walking around, especially in the dating world, and they're looking for something great. They're looking for this amazing relationship, but they're emotionally unavailable. And part of this is due to the fact that men, one, don't know their emotions. Men don't really understand them because we've never actually sat down and classified them. You know, the emotional vocabulary of men is incredibly small. It's smaller than women, and women actually have a very small emotional vocabulary compared to how many emotional words or representations are actually out there. But what does this mean when we're emotionally unavailable, guys? Well, it means that you're not able to really accept any of your emotions nor the emotions of somebody else. So the connection is fractured. You don't really have that. And so as men, how do we get to a place where we're emotionally open to be able to accept a good relationship, but also accept ourselves and the emotions that we have? This is a big problem for men because what happens when we get to an emotional state, we tend to disassociate. So when we get to an emotional state, we tend to disassociate. And the reason why we do this is because we're not equipped in most cases to sit there and say, okay, here's the emotions I'm feeling. How do I deal with that? How does this come into my field of view? And then how do I manage that with somebody else? How do I manage their emotions to then create a connection? Most of the time, what we do is we are problem solvers. All you guys know this, because majority of you watching this right now are problem solvers. You guys you see something and you want to jump into solving that problem, even for yourself. And so what happens is the emotion becomes a byproduct instead of the product. And then the product becomes solving the problem to then move past it, but never dealing with the emotion. So when we have repressed emotions, we're not emotionally available to accept new emotions for new relationships. And so we don't end up having the availability to be open for that. We end up repressing old emotions. We're holding all that stuff. We don't free up space. Think of your energetic system, your emotional system, even your subconscious as a computer, right? You only have so much space on your computer. And when that space is not freed up, you can't download new apps. You can't save things. All that shit plays into our system as human beings. Now, whether we want to believe that is up to you. But in reality, we are a highly intricate computer system and there is bandwidth there. And the bandwidth, when it starts to get maxed out, we're not able to leave ourselves open to receive new emotions. So emotional unavailability becomes a large problem for men. One, for new relationships. Two, for existing relationships. Existing relationships, it ends up being a large problem because when your significant other or whoever you're dating wants to share something with you, you're not able to connect with what they're sharing. And then in turn, you're unable to be empathetic for them. And empathy is a key component to understanding not only your emotional intelligence and how things come up with you and the things that you feel when certain situations or comments are made, when things trigger you, but also empathy allows you to understand the other person so that you can be like, hey, I actually truly understand where they're coming from and I realize why they're acting this way, why they're saying these things. Maybe it has nothing to do with me, but you don't really get to that point unless you have empathy down, unless you've started to master empathy. So understanding that going back to being emotionally unavailable is going back to saying that you actually have not dealt with your emotions, whether from past experiences, whether from current experiences, whether it's just what you're feeling even in this moment. You end up pushing and repressing those as opposed to acknowledging, accepting, and identifying them, and then moving in a direction that allows you to actually understand the emotions to then free up space to feel more emotions and then to accept more emotions. Now, as men, it's not a cop-out to say that we're not taught these things. We truly aren't from a young age. Majority of us are sitting here being brought up in an environment that teaches us that, stoicism and toughness and having thick skin, which, they serve their purpose, but that is the measure of a man. And to deviate from this, to dive into an emotional understanding of who you are or an emotional understanding of other people, to dive into that is going to end up blocking you from being a man or emasculate you in front of other men. And that in and of itself is obviously a programming system, not to defer it or not to play victim to it. It's just to understand that that's the hardwiring we're set up with. That's the RAM that you currently have in your computer system. That's your part of your bandwidth. Until you can release that, so this is the second part. The second part of this is releasing old limitations and perceptions so that you can make way for new ones. And the new perceptions have to be there to allow you to accept more emotions. They have to be there to allow you to say, oh, I can accept another person's emotions. I can make a different connection with this person because I've changed the perception and I've stopped writing the story for that person based on my experience and based on what was given to me. So being available to say that you have to rewrite or you get to rewrite your story, your perception, what was given to you when you were younger, having that availability is going to allow you to free the rest of the other stuff up so you can actually be open to doing more things with other people and allowing yourself to have deeper connections. So then when guys are sitting there, oh, I can't connect with my wife, or oh, I can't get a girlfriend because X, Y, and Z, part of this is because you're carrying around emotional unavailability. That is part of the root of your problem. And until we recognize that that is part of the problem, we can't go back to say, hey, how do I actually change this? Or what are the tools that I need to move away from this so I can actually be available, so I can connect these people? The last parts of this is our kids. You can't be emotionally available for your children. You're going to end up judging them, resenting them, holding them accountable to the standards that were put on you that are making you emotionally unavailable. You're going to do all of that until you start to realize that you get the opportunity to be emotionally available. And that takes a little bit of work on your side. That takes a little bit of awareness. That takes a little bit of acknowledgement. That takes time, and it takes self-reflection, but you got to give yourself the opportunity to do all those things so you can change the pattern, and you can allow your children to change the pattern for their life, so they're not carrying around the same shit you're carrying around, so they're emotionally available for the people in their lives when they get older. So when men are disassociated, a majority of that comes from the fact that you are actually disassociating because you have not figured out how to deal with the emotions that you have, for good or for bad, right? It's not always negative emotions. Even not being able to acknowledge the happiness and the positive and excitement and all the other emotions that come with a good feeling. A lot of the guys can't even acknowledge those. We don't have space for it. Not only do we not have space, we don't know how to handle them, which is why we end up trying to move on to the next thing. Or it's why we end up trying to take that moment and not sit with it and not allow ourselves to have the joy and the fun in our lives. We don't accept those things. And part of that is because of the fact that We can't accept joy. We can't accept the emotions of positivity because we don't feel like we deserve it. And so this isn't just about negative emotions. Everybody wants to talk about those. It's also the positive emotions. When we can't accept the positive emotions, we don't have the emotional availability to accept the positive emotions of others, which then also becomes why we're negative towards them. We're not supportive. We're not helpful. So when we can figure out how to release some of this old stuff, we can figure out how to accept the positive emotions, how to accept the negative emotions, and work with them in our lives, then we can start to change the patterns and be emotionally available on both spectrums for the people in our lives and for ourselves. That's where we can start to give ourselves gratitude and high fives for accomplishments. It's not just expected for you to do something great in your life. It's to allow yourself to do something great and tell yourself you did something great. And then take a moment and say, yeah, man, like I did that stuff. Like I worked my ass off for this. I did a great job. I put in a lot of effort and I feel amazing about it. What most men do is they criticize the actions it took them to get there. Yeah, I did this, but I could have done that better, that better, that better. There's room for improvement everywhere. But when you allow that to be the focus of your positive emotions, you end up disassociating from the positive emotions, you end up repressing them, and then you end up looking for the negative emotions and still feel bad, even when a good situation arises. You still feel bad. And how many guys are here sitting like, shit, yeah, that's me. Yeah. Most of us, men, this is most of us. So don't feel alone. This is how we operate. It's pretty much how we've been programmed. It's not something that is unprogrammable, but the first step is taking awareness of how we are unavailable for emotions and how that affects our relationships with the people around us and with ourselves. Take that into consideration as you guys move through the week, as you guys move through your life. Start to take notice of those things. When you can't connect with somebody's emotions, it's because you haven't connected with that emotion in yourself. So where is that in you? What caused you to repress it? What caused you to have it come up? And then how can we address and acknowledge that root of where that emotion is? That is what is important, men. This is the start of how we can become more emotionally available for everybody in our lives, to include ourselves. It is where we can actually start to get emotional intelligence, EQ, develop empathy, develop the great things of the building blocks of happiness in where we are and where we're going. This is the beginning to that. So guys, if this resonates with you, take it, move forward with it, acknowledge it, write down those emotions, start to dive into yourself for a little internal reflection, and start to think about how can you offload the repressed emotions, how can you acknowledge them, and then how can you move into accepting them and then utilizing that space to create emotional connections in other places in your life. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed it. Until next time.